Voltron is the latest roller coaster to open at Europa Park and marks the debut of Mack Rides' new Stryker coaster. As the Mack company owns the park, it's clear that they wanted to impress with this ride, as the previous mega coaster they showcased here, Blue Fire, helped them sell 8 clones of that ride and several custom designs to parks around the world. To me, it's clear from the design that their intention is to show that this coaster can do pretty much anything any other roller coaster can, and as a result, it's got a feature-packed layout. Let's break it down. Voltron starts with a short pre-show section as the ride leaves the station with a slow turn to the left, accompanied by some impressive electricity effects, followed by some shenanigans where you're vibrated and then bounced up and down several times on a trick section of track. As the tension builds, the doors in front suddenly open and you're thrust forward into a launch that continues beyond the 90-degree vertical angle and you complete an inside top hat inversion. You then pull out into a corkscrew to the left before dropping down into a speed hill. Next up is 2 back-to-back Immelmann inversions that form an element similar to a pretzel shape. You then dive down into an LSM boost that sends you straight into a long 0G stall. This element gives several seconds of weightlessness before you exit it by rolling to the right, then cresting a powerful airtime hill that leads into an upward chicane that then twists to the right before diving to the left into a dive loop inversion. The train is then rapidly brought to a halt by brakes, and the train eases gently forwards onto a turntable section that also serves as the ride's transfer track. After coming to a complete stop in this building, video effects play on a circular screen above you, and then there are also some smoke effects used. The turntable then slowly spins around 180 degrees, so you're pointed in the opposite direction from which you entered, and more video effects indicate the power building up. After a brief pause, you're then launched backwards up a junior scorpion tail, giving a brief moment of weightlessness before you're sent back down into the ride's third launch. This provides a powerful boost and you're sent up the ride's top hat, giving some strong airtime before you dive down and turn to the left into another powerful airtime hill. Exiting this hill, you turn slightly to the right, then go into a left-banked airtime hill. A double-up sequence of airtime hills then sends you into the mid-course brake run, before you suddenly dive downwards into a corkscrew to the left that transitions into a diving right turn close to the ground. You then twist to the left and go upwards into another turn before coming down into a corkscrew to the right before the final airtime hill leads you into the brake run. As you can see, there's a lot going on this coaster, with a world first beyond vertical launch, turntable, swing launches, and a whole lot more. And that's not even mentioning the ride station, which has got a moving walkway to keep the line moving and maximise capacity. I really think that Mack wanted to show here that this is truly a unique coaster that can do anything other ride manufacturers can do, and then some. So what's it like to experience this ride? I'll break it down as best as I can, but it's overall quite a hectic experience where the elements come at you thick and fast. My first impression after my first ride was wow, what an experience, as it packs so much in. I'd managed to avoid all spoilers for the ride, other than having an idea of the outside layout, but the station and pre-show were entirely new to me. The pre-show came as quite a bit of a surprise, as you go around the corner to the left and then stop before the electric video effects start up and the carriage vibrates and you're bounced up and down on the trick track section. This has got quite a neat experience and fits the ride well, helping to build anticipation for what's to come. There must be some pretty powerful actuators that move the train though, as you do actually get a bit of airtime when you're lifted up and down, and it's almost like a turbo drop tower, in mini form. The beyond vertical launch was also quite interesting, as it feels like it comes in 2 waves, the first one pushing you upwards and the next throwing you over the top. You get some hang time at the top of the launch as well, before you dive back downwards. It's a novel way to start a ride and looks pretty cool when you're watching it off-ride, as suddenly hear this noise of the LSMs and then the coasters fired out of the top of this building straight into an inversion. The sequence of inversions at the start of the ride almost reminded me a bit of the Smiler roller coaster, as they are very closely spaced without much in the way of breathing room between them. It's a rapid sequence of flips upside down, only separated by a speed hill, just like you get in Alton Towers' signature coaster. The ride isn't solely focused on inversions however, and instead has a good amount of airtime. The airtime moments on this ride all deliver strong ejector forces, and there are also some pretty large hills there which do it in a sustained fashion. There are also some fairly strong positive G moments on the ride as well, although none of these are sustained for that long, so there's little chance of experience ending grey out when you're riding. The closest you'll come is during the final sequence with the low to the ground turn after the mid-course corkscrew, with some good positive forces going on. The second launch isn't very powerful, however it serves its purpose as it seems to send you into the 0G stall at the exact right speed to provide a long sustained 0G float throughout that element. The other launches on the ride all deliver quite a kick, however. In the past, I've been left rather underwhelmed by Mack launches on their coasters, with Helix, Icon and Blue Flyer clones never delivering a launch that accelerates that rapidly or feels that satisfying. This definitely isn't the case here. Unlike those other rides, Mack have doubled up the LSMs, with 2 lines of them side by side rather than a single line, and the result is a much punchier launch that feels a lot more forceful. This allows for the beyond vertical launch and a more powerful swing launch at the midway point. I suspect that the backwards part of the swing launch may well catch a few people by surprise as well, as there's no way to see it when watching the ride in the nearby area. The back half of the ride is pretty much completely hidden from view, unless you look closely while riding the park's observation tower. Voltron really has extraordinary pacing. The first half packs in a lot of inversions, and the second part packs in airtime and high G moments. Apart from a brief respite you get on the turntable, the ride is pretty much relentless, and there's never a dull moment. It's really quite breathtaking and an incredibly designed coaster. This relentless pacing and the powerful launches really make it feel unlike any other coaster designed by Mack. In the past, I've loved rides like Helix, which has an incredible, amazing, graceful flow through it and smoothness of the inversions, but Voltron is really different and much more aggressive in the way it ramps up the intensity and variety to a whole other level. The name Voltron may sound like a Saturday morning cartoon villain, but it still fits the ride rather nicely, and I thought the theming of the ride was really excellent. There's also a 4D film shown at one of the theatres in the park to give a bit of backstory, but the coaster already kind of speaks for itself. It's sponsored by Rimac, an electric sports car manufacturer, however the ride is actually themed around famous scientist Nikola Tesla. Thus the ride fits into the Croatia theme section of the park, which is the country which now contains Tesla's birthplace. To be honest, the Rimac sponsorship does feel a little odd, and it would probably have made more sense if a different electric car manufacturer sponsored the ride. I guess Elon didn't want to cough up the cash to do it though, and we're left with Rimac. The Rimac Navara is undoubtedly a cool car, but its ultra-modern design doesn't really seem to fit with the steampunk Tesla aesthetic that the ride has got going for it. The queue-line has some nice theming within it, including a 360-degree water tunnel, the likes of which I haven't seen outside of the old Poseidon's Fury ride at Islands of Adventure. There's a bunch of other props too, and the area around the ride has got architecture that I assume is authentically Croatian. There's also a new food truck area, where I had some sort of meat-filled flatbread, the name of which I'm going to put on screen now as I've got no idea how it's pronounced. Whatever it's called, it was tasty, and went well with a large beer in between rides. There are 2 Tesla towers around the ride as well, inspired by the Wardenclyffe Tower, and I've seen some cool pictures of how it looks at night, although sadly the ride closed well before sundown on the day that I went. It seems it would make for an amazing night ride though. The theming of the ride building is also really impressive. In one of the areas there's an experiment which shows a rat being teleported, which can either have seemingly several different outcomes, from a live squeaking rat to some sort of squished dead creature. Maybe that doesn't inspire all that much confidence in the ride if you're a bit nervous before going on. As you enter the main ride building, there's a Tesla animatronic that speaks various languages, and an up-close demonstration of some arcing electricity, which is pretty impressive for something in a queue line. This seems to be a real practical effect as well, and I'm quite impressed to see it up close. There's a window displaying one of the trains as it's launched, but most of the time some shutters close down so you can't actually see it. On the rare occasion the shutters stayed open, the electric effects combined with the trick track making the ride car jump up and down looked fantastic just before the ride launched. I wasn't able to capture this on film unfortunately, as it was a pretty rare occurrence and every time the shutters seemed to close to obscure the view. I think the theming's meant to represent the teleportation of the carriage from one side to the other of the room, as there's a video that plays on the opposite side of the hall. If you look closely you may even recognise one or two of the train's occupants as members of the Mack family. There's also another cool thing that happens inside the ride building that I've dubbed the Electric Symphony. This happens maybe every 20 minutes or so, and a tune is played using high voltage, creating lightning effects on the ceiling. This was very impressive to witness in person and is really something I'd never ever seen before. So it's a pretty awesome ride, right? Well, there is an elephant in the room that I haven't addressed yet, and you've probably heard about this issue elsewhere. The ride has some pretty bad problems with roughness. For me, this was quite variable, and I've heard it may be a problem with some but not all of the trains. The smoothest ride I had was in the front middle seat, but some of the rides I had on the wing seats in the second or third row were really quite shaky. The problem seems to be worse the further back you sit, but I couldn't say that for sure as the coaster operates 7 trains and it's luck of the draw which one you get. The rough shaking was at its worst when the trains experienced strong positive G, and whilst it makes the ride a bit uncomfortable, it didn't stop me from enjoying it. It is a bit surprising that this brand new Mack Showcase coaster has issues with roughness though, as you would expect the company would not want to have that detract from an otherwise impressive ride. I've heard Mack is trying to fix the problem, but as it stands, it's something I need to mention and that you should be aware of before you ride it. Previous Mack wing-style coaster trains on the Big Dipper rides have also been a bit shaky before, and I hope the additional bracing on these Stryker chains would eliminate it. But perhaps it's more of a challenging engineering problem than I thought it would be. Wing seats on coasters will always be difficult to construct, as they won't have the same support that a normal train has, and whilst having your legs dangling with nothing below you does enhance the coaster experience, I'm not sure if it's worth the trade-off for the roughness and less comfortable ride. Maybe Mack will debut a non-wing version of the 4-across train that solves the problem, or maybe changing the wheel compound, or tightening some screws, or changing from hexagonal to round wheels will help. Whatever the solution is, I'm sure Mack will be considering all options. For now though, the roughness is a big detractor, but was never so much that it stopped me from enjoying the ride outright. Mack have certainly got a lot of things right with this coaster, and one of them is the loading station. When you walk up onto a moving conveyor belt before you get in the train, it's clear that they're thinking a lot about capacity, and I suspect this coaster may be targeting parks that need that as a feature, such as Universal or even Disney. According to RCDB, it can manage 1,600 people per hour, but with all 7 trains running, I'd be surprised if it wasn't even higher than that, as even when the queue line stretched into some horrible temporary cattle pens first thing in the morning, the wait time was still about an hour for the ride in the normal queue, and the single rider line was usually slightly faster. It did seem that the efficiency of the ride reduced a bit later in the day, as with a similar length queue I had previously was 60 minutes, I ended up waiting about 90, although I was lucky enough on that occasion to get a front row ride, and that was my last ride of the night. There's also no way to choose a particular seat or row, so I never got a back row ride, and the ride reservation virtual queuing system that the park has doesn't currently apply to Voltron, although the ride is set up with an extra queue line, so that'll probably become a thing in the not too distant future. So how does it compare to other similar coasters? Well, to be honest, there aren't really that many similar coasters that are easy to compare to Voltron. The rapid sequence of elements is similar to the Smiler, as I mentioned previously, but this ride has much more variety to its elements, and it mixes up the inversions with more airtime. I suspect the coaster is aiming to compete with other Gerstlauer Infinity coasters though, so I guess Karnan could be a worthy comparison, as they both have some sort of trick track element. But the two coasters are still very different, with Karnan having larger, more drawn out elements, and Voltron having a wilder pacing. Perhaps Karako's a good comparison, although it's much less complex design, and there's probably recency bias there on my part as I rode it on the same trip as my one to Voltron. There's a couple of coasters I'm yet to ride that may again compare favourably though, such as Storm Coaster in Dubai with its vertical launch, but honestly, Voltron as a complete package is pretty much unlike any other of the 1,150 coasters I've ridden. The roughness will hopefully be fixed, or you can try the ride in the front and the middle where it'll alleviate it somewhat, but I think it's still an outstanding coaster that you should make every effort you can to go and ride. Hopefully you've enjoyed this review video, where I've tried to cover all the important points concisely. If you enjoy this sort of coaster content, then please consider subscribing and dropping the video a like to help me grow the channel. I love reading your comments as well, so let me know what you think of this coaster and when you intend to ride it. I've been Rollercoaster David, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you again in another video very soon.